The Senate will come to order. Mr. Schaffler, please call the roll.
Senators Amabile, Baisley, Ball, Bridges,
Excused.
Bright, Carson, Catlin, Cutter, Danielson,
Excused.
Doherty, Exum, Frizzell, Gonzalez, Henriksen, Judah,
Excused.
Kipp, Kirkmeyer, Kolker, Liston, Lundin, Marchman, Michelson-Genet, Mullica, Pelton B, Pelton B,
Pelton B. Pelton B.
Pelton R, Rich, Roberts, Rodriguez, Simpson, Snyder, Sullivan, Wiseman, Winter, Senate District 17 vacant. Mr. President.
Let's do this. The morning roll call is 31 present, 0 absent, 3 excused, and 1 vacant. We have a quorum. Senator Snyder, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Thank you, Mr. President. Please follow me with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Approval of the journal. Senator Rich.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate Journal of February 24th, 2025 be approved as corrected by the Secretary.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Strong no vote, but the ayes have it, and that motion is adopted. Senate Services.
Correctly printed, Senate Bill 179 and 180. Correctly engrossed, Senate Bill 15, 35, and 73. Senate Resolution 6. Correctly re-engrossed, Senate Bill 70 and 129.
Mr. Schaffler, please add Senator Judah to the roll. Committee reports.
Committee on Education, after consideration on the merits, the committee recommends the following. Senate Bill 153 be amended as follows, and as so amended be referred to the Committee on Appropriations with favorable recommendation. Committee on Judiciary, after consideration of the merits, the committee recommends the following. Senate Bill 43 be amended as follows, and as so amended be referred to the Committee on Appropriations with favorable recommendation. Committee on Judiciary, after consideration on the merits, the committee recommends the following. House Bill 1081 be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation and with the recommendation that it be placed on the consent calendar. Committee on Judiciary, after consideration on the merits, the committee recommends the following. House Bill 1050 be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation and with the recommendation that it be placed on the consent calendar. Committee on Judiciary, after consideration on the merits, the committee recommends the following. House Bill 1129 be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation.
Third reading of bills. Consent calendar. Mr. Schaffler, please read the titles of all the bills on the consent calendar.
Senate Bill 15 by Senators Cutter and Marchman and Representatives Velasco and Morrow concerning updating the Wildfire Information and Resource Center website. Senate Bill 73 by Senators Liston and Marchman and Representatives Kelty and Martinez concerning enhancing support for military-connected children with disabilities who enroll in Colorado schools. Senate Bill 35 by Senators Frizzell and Michelson-Genet and Representatives Clifford and Weinberg concerning establishing a limitation of actions against an individual performing a real estate appraisal practice.
Majority Leader Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the passage of all the bills on third reading of bills, final passage consent calendar, which are Senate Bill 15, Senate Bill 73, and Senate Bill 35.
Any discussion on any of the bills? Seeing none, the motion is the passage of all the bills on the third reading of the bills consent calendar. Are there any no votes? Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wish to be counted as a no vote on Senate Bill 25-035.
Senator Sullivan will be counted as a no vote on Senate Bill 35. Any other no votes? Seeing none, with a vote of, I'm so sorry, Mr. Schaffler, please add, oh, we can. Okay, with a vote of 31 ayes, 0 no, 1 absent, 2 excused, and 1 vacant, Senate Bill 15 is passed. Co-sponsors. Senators Winter, Kipp, Snyder, Cutter. It's a nice bill to co-sponsor. No, that's fine. Extra level of veneration. Senator Michaels and Janae, Amabile, Catlin, Exum, Liston, please add the president. With a vote of 31 ayes, 0 no, 1 absent, 2 excused, and 1 vacant, Senate Bill 73 is passed. Co-sponsors, Senators Pelton B., Exum, Mullica, Roberts, Weissman, Colker, Cutter, Majority Leader, Amabile, Snyder, Henriksen, Judah, Michelson Janae, Kipp, Winter. Please add the president. Members, we are restating the vote count for Senate Bill 15. There was a technical error with the computers. So for Senate Bill 15, with a vote of 32 ayes, 0 no, 0 absent, 2 excused, and 1 vacant, Senate Bill 15 is passed. And we do not need to do co-sponsors again because we already did co-sponsors. All right, moving on to Senate Bill 73. With a vote of 32 ayes, 0 no, 0 absent, 2 excused, and 1 vacant, Senate Bill 73 is passed. Any additional co-sponsors that did not already raise their hand? Got you if you rose your hand before. Okay. With a vote of 31 ayes, 1 no, 0 absent, 2 excused, and 1 vacant, Senate Bill 35 is passed. Co-sponsors, senators. We're on 35. Co-sponsors for Senate Bill 35. Two amazing sponsors who are not advocating for co-sponsors. All right. Oh, wow, Senator Mullica. Thank you for that co-sponsor on Senate Bill 35. You see what you're messing up our reader. No other co-sponsors. All right. Moving on. Mr. Schaffler, please. Oh, we still can't. Okay. Mr. Schaffler, please add Senator Danielson to the roll. General orders, second reading of bills, consent calendar. Senator Kolker.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for consideration of general orders, second reading of bills, consent calendar.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The motion is adopted. The Senate resolve itself to the Committee of the Whole for consideration of general orders, second reading of bills, consent calendar, and Senator Kolker will take the chair.
The committee will come to order and the court rule is relaxed. Will the clerk please read the title of all the bills on the general order second reading of bills consent calendar?
Senate Bill 140 by Senator Pelton-R and Representative Johnson concerning adjusting dollar amounts related to the administration of irrigation districts formed pursuant to the irrigation district laws first enacted in 1905 to account for inflation. House Bill 1002 by Representatives Brown and Gilchrist and Senators Amabile and Pelton B concerning the determination of health benefits coverage for mental health services.
Majority Leader Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move for the passage of all the bills on general order, second reading of bills consent calendar, and the associated committee reports, which are Senate Bill 140, House Bill 1002, and the Health and Human Services report.
Is there any discussion on the committee reports? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of the committee reports on the general order, second reading of bills consent calendar. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the committee report is adopted. Is there any discussion on any of the bills on the consent calendar? The motion before the body is the adoption of all the bills on the general order, second reading of bills consent calendar. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the bills are adopted. Majority Leader Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the committee rise and report.
The motion is for the committee to rise and report. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the committee will rise and report.
Senate will come to order. Senator Kolker.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee has met and had a number of bills under consideration. Will the clerk please read the report?
February 25th, 2025. Mr. President, your committee of the whole begs leave to report as it had under consideration the following attached bills, being the second reading thereof, and makes the following recommendations thereon. Senate Bill 140 passed on second reading and ordered engrossed and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. House Bill 1002, as amended, passed on second reading and ordered revised and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage.
Senator Kolker.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the report.
There we go. The motion is the adoption of the committee of the whole report. Are there any no votes? With a vote of 33 ayes, 0 no, 0 absent, 1 excused, and 1 vacant, the committee of the whole report is adopted. Senate Bill 140 passed on second reading and ordered engrossed and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. House Bill 1002, as amended, passed on second reading and ordered revised and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. General orders, second reading of bills. Senator Kolker.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate resolve itself in the committee of the whole for the consideration of general order, second reading of bills.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. The committee will resolve itself in committee of the whole for consideration of general order second reading of the bills. And Senator Colker will take the chair.
The committee will come to order and the court rule is relaxed. Will the clerk please read the title of Senate Bill 24?
Senate Bill 24 by Senators Roberts and Frizzell concerning judicial officers.
Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move Senate Bill 24 and the Appropriations Committee report.
To the Appropriations Committee report, Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We had a robust discussion in the Appropriations Committee about the funding related to this proposal, and some amendments were adopted that will be amended, but once we get past. But for now, I'd ask for an aye vote on the committee report, and then we'll discuss some changes to that.
Is there any discussion on the committee report? All right. Seeing none, the motion is the adoption of the committee report. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the report is adopted. To the bill, Senator Roberts. There's an amendment at the desk. Will the clerk please read the amendment? Senator Roberts.
Amendment L008.
Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move L008.
To the amendment, Senator Roberts, is there any discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This amendment, colleagues, reduces the total number of judges being a part of this bill package being added to the state from 29, as the introduced version of the bill had, to 15. And we'll discuss a little bit more in just a bit as to why, but for now I'd ask for an aye vote on L008.
Is there any other discussion on this amendment? Yes. Senator Kirkmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I need to have an understanding on the discussion of the amendment. Is this just related to the reducing the judges down from 29 to 15, or does it include the public defender and the Bridges program in the amendment?
Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I stated previously, this is the amendment to reduce the number of judges from 29 to 15.
Any further discussion? Senator Kirkmeyer. Senator Kirkmeyer.
And I just want to know if that's still consistent with what was brought. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Apologize. I just want to know if that's consistent what was brought forward in appropriations, or if it's being increased from the amendments that occurred in appropriations.
Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the Appropriations Committee adopted a version of the bill, or passed a version of the bill that had 29 judges, and now we're amending it down to 15.
All right. The motion is the adoption of Amendment L008. All those in favor say aye. All opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the amendment is adopted. Are there any other amendments? We have an amendment at the desk. Will the clerk please read Amendment L009?
Amendment L009.
Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move L009.
To the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this amendment amends the Appropriations Committee report to account for the change we just made. So when you go from 29 judges to 15 judges, you're going to have a significant reduction in appropriation. We also are including funding in this amendment for the public defender. As you all know, we have a constitutional obligation to provide a legal defense to indigent defendants, and so when you add new judges, you're creating new criminal dockets, and the public defender needs funding for that. There have been some changes, though, from the original allocation of judges to civil dockets or criminal dockets, and so there is a net reduction in the amount of funding going to the public defender because some of the judicial positions we're creating are going to have exclusively civil dockets and thus will not need any public defender funding. The Judicial Department also agreed to remove one of their FTEs from their fiscal request, so you are seeing a net reduction in the appropriation as compared to what was brought forward to the Appropriations Committee. We also are not including funding for the Bridges program in this amendment. Even though there will be a departmental difference in the fiscal note, we thought that they could have a further conversation with the Joint Budget Committee at a later time about that funding. So I think this is a reasonable way forward on the funding piece. Again, when we get to the bill, my colleague and I are looking forward to discussing the merits of the bill, but on the appropriations piece, we think this represents a reduction while still providing adequate funding to the state's constitutional obligations.
Discussion on L009. Mr. Minority Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Question for the bill sponsors. In my experience, I spent more time in the judiciary aspects of the policy of the state when I was in the House than I have here in the Senate. But I know that the issue persists that the public defenders, the state public defender's office is a little bit inscrutable in terms of budget and where the money is in fact allocated to. Is there anything in this amendment that would give us any greater clarity as to where the funding inside the public defender's office would in fact be going?
Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Minority Leader. So the fiscal analyst works with the public defender's office, and there's a formula. It's not a statutory formula, but it's a formula that's based on evidence and data over many, many years. And so shorthand version is every new judge that has a criminal docket needs 2 public defenders, so 2 attorneys. And then there are support staff that come along with each of those attorneys and investigator requests. So that is noted. If you have the most recent fiscal note, which is dated February 24th, that does explain kind of how they arrive at those numbers. So we didn't change the 2 attorney per judge request or formula. But like I mentioned earlier, we did replace 2 of the county court positions with district court positions that will have exclusively civil dockets, so they will have no public defender funding at all.
Mr. Minority Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the bill sponsor for that answer. Digging into this new fiscal note dated yesterday, the follow-on question that I have is with regard to the judges that are assigned all cases, so they would have both civil and criminal. What does the formula provide for an additional public defender money in those cases?
Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Minority Leader. So that would still follow the 2 attorney requests per judge request.
Mr. Minority Leader.
Fair enough. And so a value judgment, a policy statement with regard to that, this is part of where this inscrutability within the state public defender's office is a little bit challenging. We've got a formula that says for every criminal judge there shall be 2 public defenders. In this case, we have that same formula being applied to a judge that is both civil and criminal. Some portion could be 80%, 90% of their docket could be civil in nature, and yet there is funding that is flowing into the public defender's office, into an office that has been, in my experience, historically inscrutable, and I use that word intentionally. They're very difficult to understand what they're doing with their money, where the money's flowing, and how they're using it.
Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Minority Leader, for the question. Because I do think that certainly in recognition that this was a point of concern, I was grateful for some information that I received from the fiscal analyst related to this very question. Following the Appropriations Committee, where the question around public defenders funding being rolled into these judicial funding policies. I do think it is helpful to just look back to what the past practice has been. So in 2019, in Senate Bill 19043, there was that same formula utilized for public defenders in identified criminal dockets. However, importantly, in 2015, in HB 15, 1034, there was no public defender funding because there was no identified criminal dockets in that judge's bill. In 2007 and 2001 in House Bill 07-1054 and House Bill 01-1034, because again, those bills did include criminal dockets, that funding was included as a part of the constitutional obligation for those courts to be able to run effectively. And so I just hope that that information is helpful, that this is not a new formula that is being applied, that is long-standing practice going back at least to 2001. I hope that that's helpful information. Thank you.
Mr. Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I do appreciate the method of attaching, finding, and putting money into the state public defender's office. I understand the formula. That's not my primary objection, and it's not the values statement that I'm seeking to make here. It's the transparency of the money that is there. Where is it going? How is it being used? What is being done? So I will take this moment as we're considering an appropriations amendment that does provide for additional funding to flow into the state public defender's office to say, I don't like this inscrutability. I think that the public defenders finance, the public defender's office budget, the public office, public, first name and the title, should be far more visible to how they're allocating their funding, how they're using their dollars, no matter where it flows from. And I do appreciate the method of the money being provided into these additional judicial districts. But I would beg again, ask again, demand, if I had the authority to do so, greater transparency from the Public Defender's Office. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Any other comments on L009? Senator Kirkmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, I rise in opposition to the fiscal note, or to the amendment and to the fiscal note, quite frankly, at this point, and to the amended fiscal note. So in appropriations, this bill came forward, and it had a pretty big, huge fiscal note on it. There was an amendment that was offered and passed that essentially reduced the appropriations for the Public Defender's Office and for the Bridges program. Left in the number of judges. I think it was 4 in this 25-26 year, and I thought it was 11, but I'm not exactly sure because I now have like 3 or 4 different fiscal notes in front of me, or 3. So anyways, we were able to pass an amendment that said, look, you know, even though I didn't really like it, we got an amendment on. I did like the amendment, but even though I don't like the bill, we were able to pass an amendment. The bill gets out of appropriations because of the amendment. And maybe it would have got out anyways with regard to all of the dollars that were in that first fiscal note. So here we are now, basically wiping out the amendment that took place in appropriations and coming in with the new amendment that will increase for this budget year close to $4 million in costs in this budget year, so 25-26. And in our out years, it increases to $12.2 million annually, and then we'll increase in out years 27-28. It'll be basically at $11.4 million annual increase to our bottom line, general fund money. So members, last year in the budget process and in the budget, we actually increased the number of public defenders and the number of FTE in their budget. I don't have the exact amount, but it was a huge increase in the Department of Public Safety, in the Public Defender's Office, excuse me. I want to say it was about 71 FTE. It might have been more like 52 FTE, and they asked for a huge amount of FTEs, but they got a huge increase last year through the budget process for 24-25. Huge. The Bridges program is a program that's just been newly started in the last few years. And last year alone, if you go back and look at appropriations, and we have to annualize those, 65 FTE increases. These programs are increasing leaps and bounds. I understand what our constitutional requirements are, but what we're talking about now is a level of service. We meet our constitutional requirement. We provide public defenders in the courthouse. So we are meeting our constitutional requirement. It is not a constitutional requirement that we have to have 1 to 6 attorneys or any other type of level of service. Members, in case everyone has forgotten, we are in a huge structural deficit in our state, huge. And as we went through the budget process, and as we are going through it this year for the 25-26, when the public defenders came in front of us during figure setting, when that office came in front of us, gosh, they failed to mention that they were going to need a bunch of new judges or a bunch of new public defenders for the judges bill. Now, I am just pretty darn sure the judges bill was of no secret to anyone, including the public defender's office. But what they did ask for, and keep in mind what our inflation is this year, because it's not 11.2%. The public defender's office asked for an increase of 11.2% of their general fund monies, which is basically how they're funded. They have a few cash funds, but for the most part, they are funded through general fund, and they asked for an increase of 11.2%. Nothing in here about asking for a placeholder. That's the process. If they understand that a bill is coming through, they should be having that discussion at the Joint Budget Committee and have an understanding of what this could cost them, and they should be bringing that through. They did not do that. So we didn't have any discussion about this at the Joint Budget Committee. But what we did have a discussion about is the 11.2%, or the close to $20 million increase in general fund operating. So again, just want to remind you, I think you all received a copy of a memorandum from our JBC Staff Director, Craig Harper, and our Legislative Council Staff Chief Economist, Greg Sabinski. And I'm just going to read for you parts of this, and then I'm going to go through it for all of you. But their take-home message this year is, the budget appears to be on an unsustainable path. We have done year-over-year spending increases way above any inflationary expenses increases, way above that, to where we are in this year alone, this 24-25 year, when we get that additional supplemental from HCPF, we will be close to $400 million in the hole, short of our statutorily required reserve. Next year, 25-26 budget, we're starting off way in the hole. And I'm going to go through that so you understand the importance of why we keep saying, or why I keep saying, we can't afford to keep spending. We can't afford it. You cannot spend your way out of a structural deficit. So public defenders came in this year. The Office of the State Public Defender came in with $20 million increase. That equates to 38 FTE. They also asked for 38 additional, 38.1 additional FTE in the 25-26 budget year. Knowing we have a budget deficit. When I ask for where we can cut their general fund spending, because again, it's not like we need to find $1 billion out of a $71 billion budget or a $42 billion budget. It's out of a 16.5 general fund operating budget that we need to find approximately $1 billion of cuts. At the JBC, we are not looking to try and increase above the 24-25 appropriations. We're trying to find decreases. And when I ask them for cuts, they tell me there's just no place they can cut. So if we can't cut the Office of State Public Defender anywhere, and we can't cut the Bridges program, because they asked for increases this year as well, after the huge increases last year, we can't cut them. I would just like to know where you think we should be cutting. Because yesterday I heard that can't cut the UPK, can't cut the general fund out of UPK.
Senator Kirkmeyer, can you help me
I'm talking
understand how we're
about
still
why
with the
we can't
amendment?
afford, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I'm talking about this fiscal note, and I'm talking about why we can't afford this fiscal note, which would increase in budget year state expenditures by $4 million, $4,019,935. I'm talking about why we can't fund and we can't support this fiscal note because of our structural deficit in our budget and the situation that we're in, because in out year 26-27, it would require nearly $12 million, $11,916,607, ongoing, continuously appropriated. We would have to continually appropriate those funds year in and year out when we are in a structural deficit. I am speaking to this amendment because this amendment is amending the fiscal note, and it is adding back in additional expenditures that we can't afford. So I am explaining to everyone why we can't afford these, because we keep having bills show up with fiscal notes on them. We keep having bills show up that say, oh gosh, but we're going to take that out of a cash fund. But that cash fund has general fund money in it. That cash fund continuously appropriated. The reason we got into a structural deficit is because of fiscal notes like this. Fiscal notes that continue spending more money than we have. So as you're looking at this fiscal note, and as you're thinking about, should I increase the number of judges? Should we increase the number of public defenders? Should I vote for this amendment that puts in an additional, above and beyond what we basically ended up agreeing to in appropriations, that got out of appropriations? Should I add on another approximately $4 million in 26-27? Should I add on another close to $1 million in 25-26 when I know that we have a structural deficit, when I know we can't spend our way out of it, when I know that if we keep adding on, that we won't be able to fund things in Medicaid, we won't be able to fund grant programs in the Department of Education, we won't be able to fund some of that general fund operating that we do in the Behavioral Health Administration, a new department that was created, a new administration that was created, when we know that we won't be able to fund universal preschool.
Senator Kirkmeyer.
So that's how it relates back to this fiscal note. Thank you. So I am going to explain to you why we can't afford this fiscal note. And if I have to keep reminding you to make sure that I'm talking about the fiscal note and this bill and this amendment, then I will keep reminding you that this fiscal note is increasing a fiscal note by $1 million in 25-26 and by $1 million in 26-27. And if I'm incorrect, I'm reading off of the February 24th fiscal note. Should I be reading off of the fiscal assessment? Because it says the same thing in Table 2. This is the fiscal note that adds back in the Office of State Public Defender at $756,398, and the Department of the State Court Liaison, the Bridges Program, at $94,839. That adds on, okay, about $850,000 to $900,000 in this current fiscal year of general fund. And in the out year, it will add on $3,224,595 for the State Public Defender's Office, and for the Department of the State Court Liaison, a new program that we have started. Just in the last few years, it will add on another $351,161.
Senator Kirkmeyer, is this the memorandum that went with the amendment?
I am looking at the...
I just don't have it in front of me.
I am looking at the fiscal note memorandum, which essentially repeats the fiscal note comments that are in the fiscal note dated February 24th. They both are dated February 24th. And that's what it's saying, and that's what this amendment is doing, is after, in appropriations, we took out the dollar amount for the State Public Defender's Office and for the Bridges Program, because my comments in appropriations, as you will know because you're on appropriations, Mr. Chair, dealt with that the State Public Defender's Office and the Bridges Program need to come back through the budget process. There is no way they're going to get people hired by August of 2025 when the funding is not even available till July 1. I just don't believe they're going to do it. And even if they do, I don't believe the judges are all going to get hired by August 2025, because that's what it talks about in these fiscal notes about how they need to hire people by August of 2025. In fact, it's on page 3 of the fiscal note memorandum, and it's on, I don't know what page it's on in the other one, but that's where it's on in the memorandum. And it talks about how they need to add judges by August of 2025. And then I think somewhere in here it talked about how the Office of State Public Defender will need to add 2 attorneys per criminal docket, and that they believe they're going to start by August of 2025. There is no reason why the Office of State Public Defender and why the Bridges Program people can't come back into the Joint Budget Committee and have a discussion, one, about either needs in 25-26, or there is no reason, while if these judges do actually come on board in 2025 after July 1, that they couldn't come in and ask for a supplemental. There is no reason why they couldn't do that. There is also no reason, while during our briefing and our hearing with the Office of the State Public Defender and with the people from the Bridges Program, why they didn't bring this up. Everyone knew about the judge's bill. Certainly everyone in judicial did, in the judicial branch. So that is what I'm speaking to. So again, what I'm speaking to is why we can't afford this fiscal note, and why you need to think about, all of us need to think about, every time a bill comes through with a fiscal note on it, you need to start thinking about what's not going to get funded. What is not going to get funded? Things that you voted for last year, or the year before, or the year before, or the year before, or the year before, or the year before. Because all of the excessive spending that has happened through this branch and through this executive administration has led us to a structural deficit on a path that we cannot sustain. So the reason I am so very upset over this is, when we were having our hearings at the Joint Budget Committee with Judicial, with the state, with the Office of State Public Defender, with the Bridges Program, I asked them specifically where we could cut. And I got the response that there wasn't any place they could cut in their budget. And when I asked the judicial branch, the judicial courts and probation,
Senator Kirkmeyer, please help me understand. Continue to relate this to the amendment. I appreciate that. I might be a little thick, so just help me understand.
sure. We have a structural deficit in our budget of $1 million, and that's in our general fund operating costs. So currently, in this fiscal year, we are close to $400 million short in our statutory required reserve, which is general fund money. We have a fiscal note in front of us that would add on, the total fiscal note would add on close 24.9 FTE in the next budget year, 25-26, and close to $4 million. In the out year, it's 86.9 FTE and $12.2 million. And it goes on from there. We will add that amount to our budget and to our costs ongoing. Of that amount, about $1 million, well, let me just be closer, $850,000 is related to the Office of State Public Defender and the Department of State Court Liaison in budget year 25-26. And based on the 8 assumed criminal dockets and assuming 2 attorneys per criminal docket, a total of 16 public defenders are required. Of these, and I'm reading right from the fiscal note, of these, 4 public defenders will start August 25th, August of 2025, and 12 will start July of 2026. That would be the next budget cycle. The addition of 24 public defenders requires 13.2 support staff, including investigators, at a 1-to-5 attorney ratio, legal assistants at a 1-to-6 attorney ratio, administrative assistants at a 1-to-4 attorney ratio, and central staff at 4.5% of trial office staff. Of these, 3.3 FTE support staff will start August 2025, 9.9 FTE will start July of 2026. The Bridges program, and here's what it says in the fiscal note. The Bridges program, similar to the Office of State Public Defender, the increase in the number of criminal court dockets will increase the work to the Bridges liaison to represent defendants who are found incompetent to proceed. Bridges requires a total of 2 liaisons, 0.4 manager for the new liaisons, 0.3 staff support. It is assumed 0.5 liaisons, 0.1 manager, and 0.1 staff support will start August of 2025. And 1.5 liaisons, 0.3 manager, and 0.2 staff support will start in July of 2026. Standard operating and capital outlay costs are included for these staff. So I am speaking to the increase in this fiscal note and the impact that it will have on our budget. And to be able to do that, I need to explain what we have in our budget, and explain why the difference is there, and explain what these offices and what the judicial branch has asked for in this current budget cycle, so that you get a full picture of how much funding, if this amendment were to pass, how much funding would be going both to the judicial, courts and probation, to the public defender's office, and to the Bridges program. Okay, so again, the Public Defender's Office in this next budget cycle has asked for close to $20 million increase in their budget, and that would include 38.1 FTE. had the Public Defender's Office come through and said, at the same time, we are going to need at least 4 criminal docket attorneys to start in August of 2025, and all this other support staff, which is at least 3.3, which, you know, all that annualizes to more than 3.3, probably ends up being closer to 4. All that needs to start in August of 25. Had they have come in during their hearing, which they get to have a hearing in front of the Joint Budget Committee and talk about what their needs are going to be in 2025, 26, had they had that discussion with us, then we could have gone over with them why they think that they need an increase of 38.1 FTE. Why they think that we should continue with the 28.6 FTE that are being annualized from last year's budget increases, from last year's increase of staff. They could have actually come through and defined for us how they were looking at the Public Defender's Office, and we could have had a more fair discussion at the Joint Budget Committee with regard to the budget. With regard to the judicial branch and the courts and probation, who has an increase this year, no decrease. And in reading through the memo that we received from Craig Harper and Greg Sabinski, they basically flat out say, remember when they said that we're on an unsustainable path with our budget? That the amounts, when they're looking in here and trying to add in big buckets back in and seeing what we can afford and not afford for 25, 26, they specifically say that the amounts don't include the $78.3 million increase requested by the judicial branch. So on top of everything else, we have the judicial branch asking for $78.3 million increase on top of their $3,339,381 for 25, 26. If we can't afford the 73.8, I don't know how y'all would think we could afford the $3,339,381. And in the next year, it increases. These are annual increases, not year-over-year increase from the fiscal note. So we would increase our budget, that we're in a structural deficit, that we have about $1 billion that we need to go find. We would increase it in this year with this amendment by 24.9 FTE and approximately $4 million. Next year, it would increase an additional $12.231 million. And we would be adding on close to 87 new employees in a branch that has received a tremendous amount of support and received huge increases just last year in their budget. Just last year. When asked where the decreases were, where could we decrease? Where could we cut? Because again, can't spend your way out of a structural deficit. Can't spend your way out of overspending. You have to stop spending. And it has to start this year. We also have a constitutional requirement to balance our budget. We have to have a balanced budget. So I'm asking you, if you wish to support this, there needs to be discussion from all of you about what you believe we should cut. I'm telling you, the decisions that we have to make over at the Joint Budget Committee are not fun. It takes us hours to get to $4 or $5 million cuts, $4 or $5 million cuts in one day. We agonize over $100,000 cut. We wouldn't cut a $200,000 grant in the animal welfare division for horses. But we didn't cut it. I know. A couple of us actually voted to cut it because we're not prioritizing horses over children's education. And what you're asking, what this fiscal note is basically asking to have done, and what this amendment is asking to do, is that you prioritized, you're telling me that you want to prioritize public defenders at a level of service. It's a level of service. This is a level of service issue. But you want to fund more, yet more public defenders in this next budget year, while I'm trying to cut money out of CCAP. CCAP is childcare for those truly low-income families in the state, the families who are eligible for temporary aid to needy families, the Colorado Works program. That's what we were talking about yesterday. Where do we cut in that program? Yesterday, we were talking about in universal preschool. Where do we cut general fund money from it to balance this budget? And yet here we are, this amendment, adding to our problem. You know, I wouldn't have voted for the bill with just the judges in it, to be very candid, and I think everybody understands that. But I wouldn't have had as much heartburn over that one. I probably wouldn't be up here lecturing everyone about really looking at what this means if this amendment gets on this bill and this bill passes. It means I have to go look for more cuts in the Behavioral Health Administration, in the Department of Education. So again, we are meeting our constitutional requirements. Constitutionally, it requires that we have public defenders. We have public defenders. Now, we're talking about a level of service. This is the same discussion I had with the judges and with the chief judge. We are talking about a level of service that we can't afford. So as everyone's sitting here thinking about this, and as you're getting ready to make your vote, you need to be thinking about not only this fiscal note, but any fiscal note that comes forward this year. Any one of your bills that has a fiscal note on it. But in particular today, it's this fiscal note. We really need to think about the way that we are governing in this state. And truly, what are our priorities? Because I'm wondering why the public defenders can't move people around, all of those additional people that were authorized last year. Why we keep continuing a Bridges program that is growing by leaps and bounds. It has more than doubled since its inception. It's on its way to tripling. Yet in this bill, we have an amendment that increases spending to the Bridges program by $100,000 in 25-26 and by $351,000 in 26-27. I could keep talking for a long time because we're talking about the budget.
As long as it's to the amendment.
As long as it's to the amendment, which everything I'm talking about is to this amendment and how much it costs. And the reality of, if this amendment passes and this bill passes, the reality is, and you just need to understand, there are other programs, other bills that we will have to cut, like have to cut. And it won't just be on the Joint Budget Committee. We will get pushed into a situation where it is this body that is going to have to figure out even more cuts. That's why we have an appropriations committee. That's why in appropriations, we had an amendment that passed that did not fund the State Public Defender's Office. Additional money in the next budget year. That did not fund the Department of State Court Liaison, the Bridges program, in the next budget year. Because we can't afford it without making some very dramatic cuts in other areas of state government. And those areas have to be in the programs that I talked to you about. It's not like I can get enough money out of the Department of Agriculture to make up $1 billion deficit. But we cannot keep spending. We cannot keep saying, yes, more and more money go there. I just don't know what everyone would be thinking. I just don't know where you think the cuts are coming from. So I know the good senator from Avon and the good senator from Boulder over here staring at me, wanting me to just stop talking. Sure.
Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the good senator from Weld County, just a really important correction. You keep saying that the amendment has funding for bridges. It does not. It has $0 for bridges. The fiscal analyst put in the fiscal note that bridges is requesting money, but we have decided not to do that in L009.
Could you please point that out to me?
There's no funding listed anywhere in L009 for the Office of Behavioral Health, which administers the Bridges program.
Okay. Thank you. Well, that's what happens when I don't get...
Senator Kirkmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's what happens when I don't have the amendment early enough that I can look through it and figure out what the heck it actually is doing. So thank you for that correction. I appreciate that. So again, instead of, let's make sure I'm correct. Instead of $3,897,195, it would be approximately $3,800,000 in this fiscal note. Would that be correct?
Senator Roberts.
So I would encourage the good senator from Weld County to look at L009. That is the amendment we are debating. It lists exactly how much funding is being appropriated.
Great. I need a senatorial 5 so I can actually read the amendment.
Before I do, Senator Mobley, did you have a comment? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I want to thank my colleague on the Joint Budget Committee, but I do also want to just say that it is hard. This work we're doing is really hard, and we are going to make some really tough choices. And we aren't going to pass bills with fiscal notes, with big fiscal notes this year. But we did have agreement on the Joint Budget Committee that we needed more judges. And we passed a bill through the Appropriations Committee that funds more judges. And the bill sponsors then took what we passed and made it even smaller. They put in this amendment to make that fiscal note dramatically smaller than what we passed, even with stripping out the public defenders. In the Appropriations Committee, the bill before us today has an even lower fiscal impact than what the Appropriations Committee passed. So there is no sleight of hand happening here. I think judges and access to our justice system, both criminal courts and civil courts, is a basic core function. And you all heard from the Chief Justice, that they were in desperate situation. They desperately need more judges. And we have narrowed this. The bill sponsors have worked incredibly hard to bring the costs down. And the bill before you with this amendment accurately reflects the costs. There's no savings in ignoring that some of these costs exist. So why would we want to do that? What's before you is an accurate reflection of the cost of adding these judges to run these courts. So there are more civil courts in this amended bill. There are less criminal courts. There are less judges overall. And that is the work that we asked the bill sponsors to do, and they did it. And I would encourage all of you to accept this amendment that dramatically reduces the cost of this bill.
Mr. Minority Leader, request Senatorial 5. The Senate will come back to order. Mr. Minority Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr.
And we're still on Amendment L009, just to refresh everyone's memory.
L009 to Senate Bill 24. Specifically, the lines 13 and following is what I'm most interested in the amendment. A little bit dated information here, but I'm looking at the 23-24 budget report from the State Public Defender's Office. $152 million in the context of an additional $621,337 that this amendment would appropriate. The policy piece, the value judgment, what I'd like to lean into and talk about is exactly what was being debated earlier in this well, and that is the challenge we have in terms of broader budget issues and, from my perspective, the inscrutability of the Public Defender's Office, and therefore the potential that this $621,000 of this particular amendment, which provides for, as I'm counting it up in the revised fiscal memo, not a fiscal note, but we've just got a fiscal note memorandum. So it is not an updated fiscal note, it's an update to the fiscal note that we're looking at. An additional, based on the formula of all cases and criminal cases, picking up 2 attorneys for every jurisdiction that has an additional attorney provided. We're looking at 16 additional individuals for the $621,000. The question that I'm asking, and the reason it's properly lodged, I believe, in Amendment 9 is, in tough budget years, in tough, challenging circumstances, when we all want to meet our primary responsibilities, and priorities are critically important to me, when it comes to spending money, my priority is always students. When it comes to meeting constitutional obligations, it's the sort of conversation we're having right now. Should this money, if in fact this money is provided, crowd out other policy elements? Probably so, because constitutional obligations to make sure that people get a speedy trial that are appropriately represented, yeah, that matters. And so that should be something we're talking about at a higher level than many of the other finance policy conversations that we have. But my challenge is, we don't really know because of the inscrutability of the Public Defender's Office. It's possible in this tight budget circumstance we find ourselves that the 621 is too big of a number. It's only 621,000, not 621 million, but the broader budget in 23-24 was 152 million. So there is a lot of space out there, perhaps that could be reallocated, managed in a different way, but we don't know, because that particular budget is so judiciously hidden and so inscrutable to the policymakers. So I urge you to consider seriously your relationship with Amendment 9, and eventually when we get to the bill. But as for me and my perspective, I'm not going to throw another $621,000 into a pot where it is not known exactly what's going on already with 152 million plus. It's more than that in the 24-25 year, I'm sure, but the only report I could get my hands on quickly was the 23-24 report. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thanks, colleagues, for listening.
Senator Kirkmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Speaking to just this amendment, which would add actually $756,398 to it, just with this amendment for the Public Defender's Office, which I am saying they could have gone through this year's process at the JBC. They could go through next year's process. They could ask for a supplemental. They could do a comeback on their budget this year. They have that ability. They have the ability to come back once this bill even passes, or sometime here before the middle of March. They have the ability to do a comeback on their budget request for 25-26, where the Joint Budget Committee can have a serious discussion with them about any increases in their budget and where those should be appropriately. So I'm asking for a no vote on this amendment.
The motion is the adoption of Amendment L009. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the amendment is adopted. To the bill.
Do you want to go first? No, go ahead. Okay. Thank you.
Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, colleagues, for the discussion already, and I'm glad we're to the bill as a whole so we could talk about why we're even here in the first place. Let me just first recognize all of the work that the good senator from Castle Rock has put into this, and our colleagues on the Joint Budget Committee who have helped guide us through this process. We come to you with Senate Bill 24 in full recognition that the state is in a very tough budget year and a budget situation, and to see a bill before you with a fiscal note of this magnitude is a challenge. I'll be the first to acknowledge that, and I appreciate that. But the reason why the senator from Castle Rock and I are here is because this is an essential function of government. Providing the efficient process through the court system is something all of our constituents expect. And the frank reality of right now is that that's not happening in most courthouses across the state. We heard testimony in the Judiciary Committee about some terrible situations and scenarios that people face when they enter the judicial system on the criminal side and on the civil side. If you're trying to get your day in court because you're a victim of a crime, you're a defendant, or you're trying to get a divorce, or you're going through a custody battle for your kids. The judges are so overworked in Colorado that equal justice is not being applied and speedy justice is not being applied. We heard from one judge who has to decide on the custody of children for a long period of time, potentially for many, many years, in a matter of 15 minutes, because their day is so packed and jammed that that's all the time that they have to allocate to that case. A case that means everything to that person or that group of people, but is just 15 minutes of a judge's day when normally they should be spending multiple hours, if not days, on that case. As was mentioned by the good senator from Boulder on the Joint Budget Committee, this proposal originally came in from our Chief Justice and from the judicial branch at 29 judges. We pared it back to 22, and now we've pared it back to 15. And then we've made tweaks within that of removing some county court positions that would have a criminal docket and thus necessitate more funding for the public defender, to be district court judges that have a civil docket and will not need any public defender money. So we have tried to be incredibly conscious of the cost and reducing those costs where we can. But the simple fact of the matter is, if you're going to add judges, you have to add public defender funding as well, at least some. It'd be like buying a car without tires. It's nice to have, but it won't work. And so these associated costs do have to be a part of this bill. But I have worked with the good senator from Castle Rock, with the judicial branch, with the public defender's office, with many stakeholders to get that number to as low as we think is possible. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my co-prime sponsor, but just want to reiterate my thanks to your willingness to consider this proposal in such a tough budget year. But our constituents who have to have their day in court need this support, and our judges who are carrying out their constitutional duty as the third branch of government need this support. And so that's why we come before you today and ask for an aye vote on Senate Bill 24.
Senator Frizzell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I really do appreciate the conversation we've had already today, because it's important. It's important to talk about where we are as a state from a budget standpoint. I did not put my name on this bill lightly. I put my name on this bill because it's important. It's an important piece of legislation that we need to support. I hope that some of you had a chance to listen to some of the testimony that we heard in committee. It was extraordinary. You know, one of the things that really concerned me about what's going on in our judicial system today, because of the backlogs that exist, is the lack of trust that has developed and continues to develop in our system. Our judicial system should not be one where people lose trust, where they are backed up. But at the same time, today, we have couples who are getting divorced, waiting a year or two just to move on so that they can divide their assets and figure out where their children are going to land. That puts these families in a level of limbo that's unconscionable. You have children who are being temporarily removed from unsafe homes that, again, they don't know what's going to happen to them because they simply cannot have their day in court. You know, we heard over and over again in testimony that from judges, that there is a crisis in Colorado of due process. We do not have the capability to process anything quickly. This is not right. It is broken, and it is incumbent on us to try to fix it. That number of 29 that was brought initially was not enough. That was a low number compared to the workload study that was completed. I concur with my good colleague from Weld County that we must seek ways to cut budgets here in Colorado. This bill has been pared down. The scope of it has been pared down. I don't disagree with the issues in funding around Public Defender's Office, but that's not what this bill is about. We need to prioritize the citizens of Colorado, and our courts are not, they're not serving them. They're not serving them at all. And so I am here with this bill before you, asking for your support. Thank you.
Senator Kirkmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, I'm not disputing that there are probably some issues in the courtroom and with the judges with probation, and that we don't need to figure out how to fund things. But when I asked judicial for places that we could cut while they were trying to increase judges, I got nothing. I didn't get anything back about where we could cut. And I talked to the Chief Justice, and I talked to their liaison on numerous occasions. And even during the hearing, I asked them, in your budget request, that is a 6.9% increase from the last fiscal year, that has within it over $60 million of increases in general fund operating dollars. When I asked where could we cut to accommodate additional judges in other areas, I got nothing. That's just not responsible. We too at the Joint Budget Committee heard from I think it was a Chief Justice from the Arapahoe County, whichever judicial district that is, 18th maybe. We heard from them. I'm not doubting anything that she said. I'm not saying that they don't have some issues. I would just ask all of you, maybe you should come over every once in a while and hear some of the other stories. We are in a structural deficit. We have to cut $1 billion out of our budget. Not a million, $1 billion. We have to cut $1 billion out. We are arguing at the JBC to whether we cut 100,000 sometimes, because it's that agonizing. In our child care program, that prior to being moved over to the Department of Early Childhood, we were only able to fund maybe 10 to 11% of the kids that were eligible for child care dollars. That's the CCAP program. Yesterday, the way we're going, at this point, from the governor's budget request, we would only have been able to fund 5% of those truly most vulnerable, low-income families' child care. I can come up with a sad story everywhere in several departments, including human services and child welfare services. Last year, in this current year, we're underallocated to fund child welfare services. So we're trying to figure out where we're going to find funding to ensure that we are funding child welfare services. We are way over in Medicaid because we, and I'm using the royal we, have expanded programs in Medicaid to the point where we are probably going to have to cut back on the child's health care program. We probably can't allow that to be at 265% of the federal poverty level. We're going to have to cut that back. So there are several departments that have crisis stories. We created a lot of things with one-time funds, one-time federal funds that we don't have any longer. Yet even though we knew that, we kept saying, oh no, let's just let that be ongoing and we'll change it over to general fund. That's why everything this year is being scrutinized, everything. But I will tell you, at least, maybe they didn't come back with enough, but at least the Human Services Department and even the Early Childhood Department, sort of, came back with cuts. They just didn't ignore or blow past the Joint Budget Committee. They actually came back in and said, well, we think we could make some cuts here. Most every department is coming in, again, not with enough, but at least they're trying to look for cuts, with the exception of judicial, with the exception of the Office of State Public Defenders, with the exception of the Bridges program. They didn't come back in and say, hey, to accommodate these new judges, maybe we could not increase by 24.4 FTE because of what happened over in Aurora, with them saying they're not any longer going to do municipal domestic violence cases. They didn't say, hey, maybe we could cut that back some. That's a $2.9 million request. They didn't come in and say, try and work with us. You know, when we came in front of you as a joint budget committee with our joint committees, we asked all of you to partner with us to find cuts, to find where we could kind of glide into this 25-26 budget year before we crash and burn. So that is why I'm opposed. You know, if Judicial would have come in and said, look, we'll cut $3 million out of Judicial someplace so that we can get these 4 new judges, I'd have been all in to work with them. But they didn't tell me that. One response I got was, well, we're not going to cut anything because then you just give it to the executive branch. That's crazy. That's what we're dealing with over at the Joint Budget Committee. And I understand you would all like me to just stop talking. And I probably will here in just a few minutes. But the reality is this. We cannot spend our way out of a structural deficit. And even according to our chief economist and our director of the Joint Budget Committee is saying we are on an unsustainable path. So until judicial can get over to the JBC and start working with us, figuring out where we can make other cuts, I would ask you to vote no on this bill. And I would be remiss if I didn't say thank you to the good senators from Castle Rock and from Avon. I understand, believe me, I understand completely the position you're in. I'm in it every day at the Joint Budget Committee.
The motion before the body is the adoption of Senate Bill 24. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the bill is adopted. Will the clerk please read Senate Bill 151?
Senate Bill 151 by Senator Michaelson Jenet and Representative Froelich concerning measures to prevent youth from running away from out-of-home placements and in connection therewith preventing children or youth from running away from residential child care facilities.
Senator Michaelson Jenet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move Senate Bill 151 and the Health and Human Services Committee report.
To the committee report.
In the committee, we amended out everything with costs. Please vote aye.
Is there any discussion on the committee report? Seeing none, the motion is the adoption of the committee report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The committee report is adopted. To the bill.
This bill is a very important bill regarding youth runaways from treatment facilities. The work was done by the Timothy Montoya Task Force. Timothy was a boy who ran away from a treatment facility and was hit and killed by a car. We learned through this process that there were no guidelines for what to do when a youth runs away from a treatment facility. So this will require treatment facilities to have a plan for what they will do when they run away, and we have recommendations for what should be in that plan, recommendations. And there was a lot more work by the committee over the 2 years, but we had to cut that for costs. Please vote aye.
Is there any further discussion on Senate Bill 151? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of Senate Bill 151. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the bill is adopted. Mr. Majority Leader.
Read the bill.
Will the clerk please read Senate Bill 141?
Senate Bill 141 by Senator Peltonar and Representative Winter concerning an exemption for certain municipalities from the requirement to adopt an energy code for residential buildings.
Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to lay over Senate Bill 141 until tomorrow, Wednesday, February 26th.
The motion is to lay over Senate Bill 141 till tomorrow, February 26th. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill will be laid over till tomorrow, 2/26. Will the clerk please read Senate Bill 79?
Senate Bill 79 by Senators Rich and Roberts and Representative Taggart concerning the Colorado Vending of Digital Assets Act.
Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to lay over Senate Bill 79 until Thursday, February 27th.
The motion is to lay over Senate Bill 79 until Thursday, February 27th. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Senate Bill 79 is laid over till 2/27. Will the clerk please read Senate Bill 86?
Senate Bill 86 by Senators Frizzell and Doherty and Representatives Basnicker and Hartsook concerning protections for users of social media and in connection therewith establishing certain requirements for social media companies.
Senator Doherty.
I move Senate Bill 86 and the Judiciary Committee report.
To the Judiciary Committee report. Senator Doherty. Go ahead.
Thank you. In the Judiciary, we made some amendments that reflected our commitment to addressing stakeholder feedback. We made changes to eliminate certain reporting requirements and also made changes to specifically not include broadband providers, as well as a few other clarifying amendments. I ask for an aye vote.
Any further discussion on the committee report? Seeing none, the motion is the adoption of the committee reports. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the committee report is adopted. To the bill, Senator Doherty.
I move Amendment L005.
There's an amendment at the desk. L005 has been moved. Senator Doherty, no? Excuse me, will the clerk please read Amendment L005?
Amendment L005, amend printed bill, page 14, after line 27, insert 5, notwithstanding section 6-1-601-16, as used in this section, social media platform does not include an internet-based service for
Senator Doherty.
applications.
Thank you. Our amendment in committee added in gaming to the reporting requirements for the Attorney General's office. And unfortunately, in doing so, we unintentionally removed the exemption they have from last year's bill mandating pop-up warnings on certain platforms.
Senator Doherty, will you please move L005 once again? We have to wait till after the clerk reads it.
I apologize. I move amendment L005.
Thank you. Any discussion on L005? Motion is the adoption of Amendment L005. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the amendment is adopted. Senator Frizzell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So members, I bring before you Senate Bill 86. This is a really important piece of legislation. Every day in the state of Colorado, all around the United States, our children are put at risk. They are put in danger. Social media companies have both benefits and downfalls to them, both positives and negatives. But one of the things that happens, and through stakeholding, we've heard this over and over again, is social media companies really don't have any accountability when it comes to providing a safe environment for citizens to utilize whatever they're going to use it for. And one of the biggest problems that we've heard over and over again is that we have illegal activities that take place on social media platforms, such as sales of drugs, sales of illegal drugs, sextortion. Gosh, never thought I'd say that word in this building, but here we are. Trafficking, human trafficking, sex trafficking, illegal sales of firearms on social media. I learned over the last year that MOM is not just mom and what my kids call me, but it also means metal on market. And we heard over and over and over again about how these activities are so adversely impacting our youth. One of the things that is most important about this bill, and I want to talk about this because this bill has been so incredibly mischaracterized, it is mind-boggling to me, mind-boggling. This is not an assault on First Amendment rights, unless you consider illegal activities as First Amendment rights. If you think that selling drugs on Facebook is a First Amendment right, it's not. If you think that sex trafficking a minor on Snapchat is a First Amendment right, it's not. This bill does not impede anybody's ability to post information on a social media site that is legal. And there's nuances to that, but that's not what this bill does. This bill says, social media companies, you are going to be held accountable. Social media companies, if someone dies because of a drug overdose, because of a poison that they purchased on a social media site, the DA's office has the ability to issue a subpoena and get information that is germane to that case. And you, as a social media company, have to respond in a timely manner and not let that float around in the ether until you decide to deal with it. I'm going to turn this over to my good co-prime sponsor, who I've been very honored to work with on this bill. This is an important bill, members. It's an important bill.
Senator Doherty.
Thank you. And I just wanted to reiterate what has already been said, but we believe Colorado has a responsibility to regulate social media to minimize the harms that are impacting our youth and making our communities less safe. And I want to reiterate what those harms are. Those are the purchasing of firearms, drugs, and sex trafficking that occurs on these sites. Senate Bill 86 will do this by requiring annual reporting by social media companies to the Attorney General's office to ensure the platforms are protecting consumers, particularly youth consumers, by enforcing their own policies that prohibit the sale of illicit substances, illegal sale of firearms, and the sexual exploitation of minors. Requiring social media companies to evaluate users engaging in these illegal activities within 72 hours of the detection instead of delaying indefinitely, and also requiring social media companies to respond to search warrants issued by Colorado courts within 72 hours and have a dedicated contact process for Colorado law enforcement agencies who need to reach someone at a social media company. Thank you, and I urge an aye vote.
Senator Frizzell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One more thing that I wanted to reiterate that has been brought up erroneously is that this bill, nowhere in it includes age verification. It is not there. It is not part of this bill. And so I wanted to publicly put that argument to rest. Thank you very much, and I ask for your support and aye vote of this bill.
Any further discussion? Seeing none? Well, Senator Carson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I support this bill. You know, this seems to, for some folks, have become a free speech issue, and I don't get that at all. To me, it just simply says that social media has to comply with the same rules and laws that other commerce has to comply with. You don't get to be exempt in social media from the targeting of minors, sales of drugs, sales of illegal firearms. The reality is social media is the world that a lot of minors operate in now, almost entirely. We've got to recognize that, and I think we have an obligation to make it as safe as we can, and make sure that social media is living by their own bylaws, by their own guidelines, and they're cooperating with law enforcement when drugs are being sold, fentanyl. You know, in the Judiciary Committee hearing, we heard about the tragedy, one tragedy after another, of children who are dying from fentanyl poisoning purchased on Snapchat, other social media. This is the reality. This is the world we're living in, folks. And I don't understand the mentality that somehow social media should be completely exempt from all of the law enforcement rules that we have for other businesses and commerce in this state and in this country. So I strongly support this legislation. I think it's a good step in the right direction, and I thank the sponsors. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Carson. And also a friendly reminder to the members, please be in the well when you want to be acknowledged to speak. Is there any further discussion on Senate Bill 86? Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to extend my appreciation to the sponsors for their work on this policy. What continues to trouble me about this bill, and I will confess that I actually couldn't really articulate it well when we were in committee, but since then I've had the opportunity to reflect on the testimony that we heard, on the concerns that were raised by particularly the district attorney from the 17th Judicial District, when he testified to the fact that currently, the current practice that prosecutors are having to navigate is going through the work of requesting warrants that are then not responded to. Okay, there are existing processes within our court systems to enforce the lack of compliance with a judicial order. And certainly I would imagine that a search warrant would fall into that category. With that being said, the language in Senate Bill 86, for lack of a better phrase, just simply says the warrants that are issued must be complied with in 72 hours. Okay. I mean, all warrants should be complied with in a timely manner and a timely process. What I don't understand about this bill, and when I asked questions about this in committee, didn't have any data to help me better understand, why aren't these orders being complied with now in existing law? And why aren't the either courts or prosecutors seeking to enforce the orders as they have already been issued? And particularly, how do the sponsors see the language as it's currently drafted to be strengthening the validity of the order as it is currently drafted in the bill? Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the sponsors.
Senator Doherty.
Thank you, and I'm happy to answer the questions that were posed by my colleague. And we did hear quite a lot of folks speaking on the subject of search warrants in committee. So essentially in the bill, I just want to be clear on what we are doing in the bill that's different. So in the bill, we are requiring social media companies to have a dedicated contact process or hotline available for law enforcement agencies. The problem, and you were right, that there is a process now when warrants are not complied with. However, the process right now is cumbersome and lengthy, and what is happening is that law enforcement agencies and the DA's offices are having to devote staffing and resources to draft and reply to motions, prepare witnesses and evidence, and hold hearings. Social media companies, however, have significant legal resources that can draw out the court proceedings, requiring even more time and effort from public agencies to hold them accountable. As a result, this mechanism does not aid Colorado law enforcement agencies in their goal, which is to get the records faster to identify public threats, aid victims, and take actions about actors engaged in illegal activity. So we believe that the additional language in this bill will help aid our law enforcement and DA's offices and getting this information. Thank you.
Any further discussion? The motion before us is the passage of Senate Bill 86. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the bill is passed. Will the clerk please read the title for Senate Bill 77?
Senate Bill 77 by Senators Kipp and Rich and Representatives Carter and Soper concerning modifications to the Colorado Open Records Act.
Senator Kipp.
Thank you. I move SB 77.
To the bill. Senator Kipp.
Thank you. So Senate Bill 77, Modifications to the Colorado Open Records Act, is a bill where we've really worked hard to get to a good place with both people who request records and people who fulfill records requests. What the situation is that most of our governmental entities have had a drastically increased number of CORA requests over the past decade. And we're not giving them additional resources to spend fulfilling those requests. Some of those requests are large and unmanageable. So what we've done here is most of the changes will expand and give a little bit more time, and I would say breathing room, to our governmental entities who have to fulfill CORA requests. For the most part, what this bill does is it moves a records request from 3 days to 5 days. And if there are extenuating circumstances, from 7 days to 10 additional days. And the reason for this is Colorado is one of only 8 states with a public records response time of 3 days or less. So we really have a very fast turnaround time. We've also stakeholdered this bill, frankly, with everybody. And we've also got gives on the other side. For instance, we now will be requiring public entities to post how to file a CORA request with their organization. We're going to require public entities to post how to make a CORA request because we think it's important for people to know how to do that. We've closed loopholes that people have asked us to close from previous CORA acts that were being abused. So I really think this bill strikes a very fair balance. I do want to mention one issue just because I think it's really important to put this on the record. One of the elements of this bill will, so for requests that are the product of people wanting to do marketing. So it's called direct solicitation of business for pecuniary gain. That's what the bill says. And for that, we allow up to 30 days to respond, and we allow people to cover all of their requests. And the reason for that is we don't think that government should be subsidizing private business. But I do want to explain what that means here on the record so everybody will understand that we're not what we are trying to do and what we are trying to do. So let's say you were an attorney and you asked your county for everybody who'd committed a particular violation in the past 5 years, and you want their names and addresses, and then you use that information to market to those people to get clients. That is direct solicitation for pecuniary gain. If, on the other hand, you are an attorney and you're working on behalf of a client and you make a CORA request, that is part of what you are doing for your business. You are not going out and trying to get new business. You are just simply trying to do your job. So I wanted to make it really clear because there's been a lot of angst over that, and I think getting it on the record makes it so that people won't interpret that incorrectly. But I would like to thank my co-prime for joining me on this bill and would like to give her an opportunity to speak.
Senator Rich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to thank my colleague from Fort Collins. She has done a lot of work on this bill. Government transparency is a steadfast priority, yet the intricacies of CORA often make responding to requests, especially during session, complicated. Extending the response deadlines is a reasonable improvement to the law, which still ensures the public's access to its government. Other good aspects of this bill are the reasonable price caps set that a custodian can charge per hour for the research and the retrieval, as well as the protections put in place to prevent school children's information from being exposed through the Colorado Open Records Act. I ask for an aye vote.
Further discussion, Senator Pelton B.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, first of all, before I get started, I just would like to thank both the sponsors. I've heard about the stakeholdering. They did an excellent job. Over and over and over again to even folks that I've stakeholdered bills with and said that these guys did it much better than I did. So I appreciate that very much. My problem with the bill, and I've already approached the sponsors, they already know, and I said in committee as well, I'm the only no vote in committee, but my issue is holding the media to a different standard than a normal individual that wants it. And my problem with that is that this is the people's business. Everybody should be held at the same standard, the people's business. I don't hold an anchor on Next any different than the guy from my district who writes as a citizen reporter in the Colorado politics. I don't hold them any different. They should not be at a different standard. And I know that I heard the sponsors talked about, one of the sponsors talk about legitimate media. Well, I think we're out of that aspect anymore. There's no such thing as legitimate media. Everybody can be media. Anybody can be media. And this is the people's business. And I feel like that they should be held at the same standard. And that's my biggest issue with the bill. I have bills coming that are gonna, with transparency and that sort of thing, and I held everybody at the same standard. I just wish that we would do that. I don't mean any offense to anybody that holds a media badge. I appreciate everything that you're doing, but I'm just saying that this is the people's business. The people's business deserves to be the people's, and everybody needs to be held at the same standard and not giving an extra, what do you want to call it, an extra loophole for somebody who's just because they're called media. So I want to thank the sponsors. I'm going to ask for a no vote on this bill, and I'm also going to ask for a no vote, even though despite my counties probably like it, and I appreciate that, but I'm still going to ask for a no vote, so thank you.
Senator Kipp.
Thank you so much to my good colleague for that. I do want to just mention why we have kept the 3 days and the 7 days in place for news media. And we have used the definition of news media that does, and I would describe them as legitimate news media, people who are credentialed and who do this for a living, because we do believe that, you know, if you are reporting for one of our newspapers that comes into our chamber every day, or one of these outlets, you are informing a lot more people, but you also have more experience in core requests, and you tend to make them more targeted and easier to fulfill. So I understand that there's a little bit of angst around that, but I also understand that if we exempted everybody, then anybody who has a blog anywhere could be considered news media and then get an exemption from this bill, which would sort of defeat the purpose of it. So I do still ask for an aye vote. Thank you.
Any further discussion? The motion for the committee is the passage of Senate Bill 77. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the bill is adopted. Will the clerk please read the title to House Bill 1030?
House Bill 1030 by Representatives Joseph and Stewart and Senators Cutter and Winter concerning the requirement that certain building codes have accessibility standards that are at least as stringent as international building codes.
Senator Winter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move House Bill 1030 and the associated local government committee report.
To the committee report. Senator Winter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We added 2 amendments in committee. One adds regional building departments because oftentimes communities will come together and share their planning resources. So we wanted to make sure that they were included. And then there was some grammatical and technical fixes. And I asked for a yes vote on the committee report.
Any discussion on the committee report? Seeing none, the motion is the adoption of the local government housing committee report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The committee report is adopted. To the bill, Senator Cutter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I was shocked to know that commercial and residential buildings, many of them remain vastly inaccessible to people with disabilities, even though the ADA has been law for well over 30 years, almost 35 years actually. Even buildings that are being built to this day don't meet minimum accessibility requirements. We heard some really amazing testimony in committee about, I mean, just shocking testimony about how people aren't able to access just basic things that we all take for granted, and how important it is for everyone to be able to move around freely in society and participate. I think that's just such a basic thing. So as we are undergoing a lot of changes in high density growth and building housing, it's more important than ever to ensure that this growth is built in an accessible way. So there's some gaps in enforcement and review for accessibility requirements. There's several things that we're trying to shore up so that we can fix that for our constituents.
Senator Winter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So what this specifically does is requires local governments with building codes to adopt current codes for accessibility. It requires the Department of Public Safety to adopt building codes that meet or exceed the standards for public schools and health facilities. This is incredibly important, as we've heard a lot from our young people, being able to access the extracurricular activities that they need to and educational needs that they have, and they aren't aren't able to in their own schools. And it requires the Department of Local Affairs to adopt codes that meet or exceed the standards as well. So just to be clear, if your city doesn't have codes, this does not apply to you. And this is a huge step forward because everyone should be able to live their full and best life regardless of the buildings they're in.
Senator Liston.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, members, I sit on the local government committee, and we heard this bill last week. And I appreciate where the sponsors are coming from, that we all want to make our buildings, whether they're public or private, accessible to the good people who might have disabilities. Something that I've heard, at least from my county commissioners, maybe you all have heard it from yours, but is over the last couple, 3 years, probably longer than that, is that they were saying, please, no more unfunded mandates. Please, whatever you do up there in Denver, don't saddle us with expenses that we're going to have to fund. So if you look at the fiscal note, there is a zero fiscal note. Kudos to the sponsors, but rest assured, I did check with two of our county commissioners in El Paso County. I specifically, because I don't pretend to be an expert, but I ran this bill by them just last week, and they said, well, in El Paso County, we might be able to work with it. It's still going to probably cost us something, but the caveat that they really emphasize, if it's a rural county, the rural counties in particular will get socked with greater expenses. So let me kind of give you an example, is that if you're an owner of an apartment complex or a townhome complex, or you have a public building that needs an upgrade, or needs to do something, if I interpret this bill right, and I think this is what was testified to, is that you might go in and say, hey, we've got to upgrade the roof, but by the way, under this, you've now got to put in a new ramp, new railings, new this, new that, to bring it up to the international building codes. So and guess who's going to pay for that? It's going to be the owner of the building, or the county, or the local municipality. There's no free lunch. While there's a zero fiscal note to the state, you're not going to be able to go in there and do these improvements or these upgrades for nothing. Once again, with all due respect to the good senators, I appreciate where they're coming from, but I just want to highlight that that there will be a ultimate cost, whether it's to the owner of the apartment complex or townhome complex, or to the city or the municipality to upgrade to comply with these new additional rules and regulations. And so it's for that reason I respectfully ask for a no vote.
Senator Pelton R.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I rise too in opposition to this bill. My counties are small, rural, frontier counties. They do these upgrades when they can afford it. To accelerate this and put this mandate on them is going to be pretty tough for them to meet. I kind of look at this as another rural-urban divide type of bill, and we just don't have the resources out there to do it right now. We do it as we can afford to, and some places are very much in front of this thing, but some aren't, and so I think making a mandate just will put too much pressure on, and so I ask for a no vote also.
Senator Frizzell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the bill sponsor's intentions with respect to this piece of legislation. It is a true feel-good bill. But In a time that we have created building regulations, both locally and statewide, that have had the ultimate impact of increasing the cost of construction, increasing the cost of construction and decreasing the affordability of housing in this state. I have grave concerns over this. Sometimes we live in the land of unintended consequences here in this building, and we don't think about the unfunded mandates that my good colleague from Colorado Springs just outlined just for his own jurisdiction. We need to maybe take a page from some other legislation that we have created in this building a few years ago, and that was around building standards, green energy building standards for commercial buildings in the state of Colorado that are, quite frankly, unattainable. If you are trying to force a property owner to retrofit an office building here in downtown Denver, and their vacancy rate is, okay, we'll be generous, 25%, but most commonly around 50%, they simply don't have the cash flow to make that happen. So it's really important that when we are talking about bills such as this, that we measure fiscal impacts to property owners. We measure the fiscal impacts to developers who this will simply increase their cost of development. We need to be working on affordable housing solutions, not creating additional roadblocks to affordability in the state of Colorado. So I rise in opposition to this bill, and I ask that you do as well. Thank you.
Mr. Minority Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the intention of the bill. There is absolutely nothing that any of us would disagree with in regard to intention. The actual applicability and enforceability may be incredibly challenging, specifically for the local jurisdictions. I thought it was interesting as I read the fiscal note that the fiscal note calls out the fact that in fact, the Department of Public Safety, the Department of Local Affairs will have additional responsibility and additional work will be required. However, they can do it within the existing resources. I so covet that phrase. I've never gotten it on a fiscal note on one of my bills, but someday, hope springs eternal, maybe I can get a positive fiscal note of that nature. The fiscal note does, however, call out very clearly that to the jurisdictions that actually do provide building codes, accessibility codes, and the requirements for construction thereof, they will have clearly additional expense. The phrase unfunded mandate has been used. I did a little teeny bit of research when I first saw this bill, looked into it, and the sorts of things that may be required are really quite challenging. Consider this: color-coded tactile paving from the United Kingdom. It's part of their accessibility standards. It's part of what they require in the United Kingdom for construction. Red blister paving, you all know the Kenji pavement where it's got the little dots that pop up and you can feel it when you're walking to the edge of the sidewalk for sight-impaired individuals. In Britain, they require red blister paving in situations where it is a controlled pedestrian crossing. So if there's a traffic light, you have to use red blister paving. However, if it's an uncontrolled transition, if it's an uncontrolled intersection, you're required to use buff blister paving. So red when it's controlled, buff if it's not controlled. That's the international standard, folks, that in fact we may be required in Mesa County, Colorado, to start repaving our intersections in order to comply with a code that is accepted international standard. So you can let your mind run for a little while about all the potential ways that the rest of the world looks at the cultural differences in how they interact and how they approach some of these challenges, and what may be required in an unfunded way to come to a community near you when everyone is struggling, especially the people of Colorado, struggling with family budgets. I urge your opposition to the bill. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for your attention.
Motion before us is the passage of House Bill 1030. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the bill is passed. Will the clerk please read House Bill 1029?
House Bill 1029 by Representatives Basnicker and Senator Kipp concerning the scope of municipal authority over land that a municipality acquires that is outside its municipal limits.
Senator Kipp.
Thank you. I move HB 1029.
To the bill, Senator Kipp.
Thank you. So this bill is titled Municipal Authority Over Municipal Land. And so I live in Fort Collins, and Fort Collins as a city has open space and natural areas that fall outside of our city limits. In our current state law, we say that if you have a park that is outside of your city limits, that you can send a ranger over to the park to make sure that it's, being cleaned, the trails are maintained, or whatever. But we have what we're trying to do with this bill is put clarity in that around municipal land for natural spaces and open spaces that may not yet be ready to be open to the public. So that is basically what this bill does, and I would like to thank my good colleague from Colorado Springs for joining me on this bill, and when the time is appropriate, we do have an amendment at the desk, but I would like to give my good colleague from Colorado Springs the opportunity to speak to the bill as well.
Senator Liston.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, members, I sit on local government, as I've said before, and we did hear this bill, and I know there's some angst from people on my side of the aisle, but I can relate to this bill because in El Paso County, I believe it's in Senator Snyder's district, we have a little mountain called Pikes Peak, and the city of Colorado Springs owns, believe it or not, owns quite a bit of land on the watershed up and around Pikes Peak, and it's parkland, and we have a lot of our reservoirs up in there too that serve our fair city. And so I could relate to this because there's different plots of land that are really outside the city, up on the side of the mountain, and so forth. So I thought this was a reasonable bill. It made good sense to be able to patrol the area so that people are not up there disturbing certain areas that can be sensitive to Colorado Springs or the fair city of Fort Collins or whatnot. They're not trying to keep people from visiting the area, but still don't disturb it and don't harm it and so forth. So I'm supporting the bill, House Bill 1029.
Thank you, Senator Liston. And just a reminder to everyone, please refer to our senators from the location or the district they're representing. Thank you. Senator Kipp.
Thank you. And so in passing this bill, what we will be able to do is we'll be able to save our county's time of having to send a deputy or a sheriff's deputy out there to monitor the land that we feel like we should be responsible for. So I think it's a common sense solution for both cities and counties. And with that, we do have an amendment at the desk.
Yes, and there's an amendment at the desk. Will the clerk please read Amendment L008?
Amendment L008, amend
Senator Kipp.
I move L008 to HB 251029.
And so be it. To the amendment, Senator Kipp.
Yes, we had the Southern Ute Tribe come to us yesterday and say, hey, we just want to make sure that this is not going to impact our tribal lands. So this is just a very small amendment to make sure that it doesn't do that. And everybody seems to be good with this language. So I hope that you're able to approve it.
Discussion on the amendment. Mr. Minority Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. It is my pleasure to, on this second reading debate in the Colorado State Senate, a chamber of 35 individuals, and a companion chamber to the bicameral chamber, the House, talk about the amendment, which is Amendment L008, so that the school children who might be listening in would understand the process. Because we know each bill gets 3 readings, and during the course of those 3 readings, it may or may not get amended. We have an amendment before us here that interacts with a sovereign nation which is bound inside the state of Colorado, and that's important. Now, the first reading of the bill is the reading that sends it to committee. And in the committee, we have testimony and people interact on the bill, and it gets amended in committee. Sometimes, when we get to the second reading debate, which is the second of the 3 required readings of every bill in each chamber in order for it to pass through and become law, it has to be read, and we sometimes amend it on second reading, which is what's going on here. And this particular amendment says, as so often happens, we come here with ideas, we want to pass the bills, and we push them through because we think we've got a great idea, and during the course of the process, somebody, and in this particular instance, the sovereign nation inside the boundary of the state of Colorado says, hey, that particular bill is going to affect us in a way that you may not intend. We want you to amend the bill. And so we have an amendment that will do that. Now, should this amendment get on the bill, it makes the bill potentially a better bill, and then we will tomorrow or later this week have a third reading debate on the bill, which is usually very short. It's the formal debate on the bill, and it's when the formal recorded vote of the bill is taken. So that is how you build Civics 101 into an amendment with regard to a Senate bill as you're observing the Colorado State Senate in action. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Minority Leader, and I'm sure Senator Holbert will be glad to know that you are following in his footsteps and proud of that. So, any other discussion on this bill? Or amendment, excuse me. No further discussion on Amendment L008. The motion is before us is the passage of Amendment L008. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the amendment is adopted. Senator Pelton B. to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, I'm not really positive why we're having this bill, because everything that's in this bill can already be done through memorandums of understandings and IGAs that we have with counties and municipalities. We already do that now. And I definitely, being a former county commissioner, did not want the city of Sterling telling the county what they get to do on land that is in the county. They tried, and they tried several times to do that to us. They even went so far to tell us that there was a 3-mile buffer around the city of Sterling that they had some sort of jurisdiction in. When I had to explain to them that if you want to have the jurisdiction in that 3-mile buffer, then you get all the road maintenance in that 3-mile buffer as well. Municipalities have relied on MOUs and IGAs to exercise authority beyond their boundaries. We can be doing that. That's what we could be doing with this. You could have a discussion with your municipality and your county, and you could come up with those memorandums of understandings and your intergovernmental agreement. That can happen now. We don't need this bill. The bill would remove a need for the IGAs in additional circumstances, streamlining municipality authority without requiring county input. The county has jurisdiction outside the municipality. The municipality has jurisdiction within the boundaries of the municipality. This is an overreach of the municipality authority. I definitely did not want my municipalities telling me what was going to go on in my county. We could have those discussions. We could come to an agreement. It's no different than what we do in this room. This side makes agreements with this side, we come to an agreement. That's what needs to happen. But we definitely don't need to give them overreaching authority within the county. I'm not a fan of this bill at all. And I appreciate with the amendments that have been brought, but I still don't like them. Still don't like this bill at all. While the bill removes administrative barriers for municipalities, it also it must also account for local differences in policy preferences. One of the best IGAs that we ever came up with in my county with the main municipality was that they did have land out in the county. They had their water treatment plant, they had their sewer treatment plant, they had all kinds of stuff out in the county. And what we did is we said, we have a building department, you have a building department. We will be in control of our land within the boundaries of the municipalities, the fairgrounds, the courthouse, you know, everything that the county had. And then you will have jurisdiction over your land, but we came up with that compromise. And that was already being done. We didn't need to we don't need this bill because we have MOUs, we have IGAs that can already do this. So I do appreciate bringing the bill. I just completely vehemently disagree with it, even though I know it's probably solving one problem in a county, and I appreciate that. But we have the authority now to come up with the memorandum of understandings and the IGAs in local governments now. We don't need this. We definitely don't need this bill. I rise in opposition of House Bill 1029.
Senator Rich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I too rise in opposition to this bill. I did hear it in committee, and while the Grand Junction Chamber opposes it, so does the Western Colorado Contractors Association. And one of the reasons and the example that they gave had to do with water. As an example, Mesa County reservoirs on the Grand Mesa go into flow lines for irrigation supply, and they're owned by the city of Grand Junction and maintained by Grand Junction Water Services. The use of water is a collaboration between partners including the U.S. Forest Service, the State Water Commissioner, Canna Creek Area Ranchers, Grand Mesa Reservoir owners, and the Powderhorn Ski Area. Allowing another municipality with different and sometimes conflicting permits and codes will be confusing to anyone who uses the property for multiple use and have done so for several years. What could be good for one community in Colorado might be burdensome for others that use the land for more than just open space. I understand that. I know that this came from one area, but it's going to have some unintended consequences in other areas. The first time I'd ever heard of a limited commission ranger was during testimony, and I'm not so sure that there's a majority of counties or municipalities that even have those. So I would ask for a no vote on this bill.
Senator Kipp.
Thank you to my good colleagues for raising those concerns. I will say that my understanding is that the Contractors Association language that they were concerned about was addressed in the House. This is a House bill. Also, I just want to say that really what we are doing is a clarification. Some municipalities currently interpret the current law's wording park to mean a natural area or open space that is either open or close to the public, and other municipalities interpret the wording to mean that a park must be open to the public. This bill really is going to get us on the same page and create some consistency. So thank you.
Senator Peltonar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, you know, I do have some issues with this bill. I think it could open a can of worms in places that we really don't need to do that. But with that, Mr. Chair, I have an amendment.
There's an amendment at the desk. Will the clerk please read the amendments L010?
Amendment L010, amend re-engrossed
Senator
bill.
Peltonar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move amendment L010.
To the amendment.
Thank you. All this does is just remove the safety clause and put a petition clause. You know, we see this, in my opinion, overused to the point of abuse. So I think there's time to get this enacted. So I would ask for support of the petition clause.
Senator Pelton B.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I concur with this amendment. I love that we're going from safety to petition. Not really sure what the point of the safety clause is on this bill, but we definitely have time to implement this, and I appreciate the amendment on this. So I rise in full support of L010.
Senator Kipp.
Thank you again to my good colleagues. I do appreciate this perspective. I will just say that as a bill sponsor who has my name on a lot of bills, whenever it is possible to put on a petition clause, I 100% agree that we should do that and give people that option. But in the cases where it doesn't make as much sense, I do ask for a safety clause. And in this case, the reason is that we already have these lands. People are already attempting to patrol them and make sure that they are safe. So we just want to make sure that it continues in this vein. So I would ask for a no vote on the amendment.
Question, any other discussion on the amendment? The question before us is the adoption of Amendment L010. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The opposition has it. The amendment is lost. Senator Kirkmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise in opposition to the bill, House Bill 1029. You know, the original language that's in law, and I'm speaking from a county commissioner perspective at this point, the original language in law makes sense. It's fine, because it basically talks to, I mean, if they have a park, which is pretty limited in scope and size, that they would have control over it, they would have their police power, they'd have jurisdictional power. I mean, most municipalities aren't out buying parks out in an unincorporated part of the county. So, you know, I mean, it's probably fine. I mean, I'm assuming that was put in probably for the city and county of Denver because they have a huge park up in another county. And for parkways, boulevards, and roads, so those are all essentially roads, makes sense. I mean, they would annex them, so that's how they would acquire them. Or I guess they could go build a road if they had the property. But it makes sense that they would be able to have full police power, jurisdiction, full municipal control, full authority over the management, control, improvement, and maintenance of any such lands, and those lands being parks, parkways, boulevards, and roads, so essentially parks and roadways. That all made sense because they went and annexed the roadway, it's theirs, and they need to take care of it, and their police would be on it. Here's the part that I have, and it's the guts of this bill. It's the open space and natural areas. So, for example, what happened in my county, it was another county, but this could happen with a city as well. They start purchasing open space, a lot of land, like a lot of land, and it's theirs. So they can control on that open space the uses that are on that land because they're in control of it. It's theirs. I mean, think of it in terms of private property. You have the right on your own private property to say whether or not things can occur there, right? So it's, you know, I think of it in those terms. But they start buying up a bunch of open space, and pretty soon they start dictating land use policies essentially in another local government jurisdiction. And they start impacting, and so they could be from, I mean, it doesn't, you know, we keep talking about this as just one situation and we're trying to solve a problem for the city of Fort Collins and apparently Larimer County. I didn't know they all couldn't get along. So I'm not thinking that's the issue. I'm thinking it's expanded jurisdiction and expanded control over open space areas that could greatly impede and greatly impact local government citizens in a different local government jurisdiction. And my example is going to be from county to county, even though it could happen from city to city. So Boulder County, which is on the western boundary of Weld County, you know, Boulder and Weld County don't think a lot think alike on a lot of issues. We have a lot of things we do agree on. But when it comes to things like oil and gas, conditions of roadways, things of that nature, but you start thinking about different uses. Because, I mean, I could go through Boulder County's comprehensive plan now. I've gone and looked through their comprehensive plan before, but they had like prohibitions on landfills. Like they didn't want to have landfills in their county. So I want you to start to what the citizens in my county wanted. And in a lot of cases it was, especially along that east audible, that competing land uses become compatible, that we're not stepping on of authority. Why would we be changing it for open space and for natural areas? Because again, open space, it's not like it's just a single roadway. I mean, are they going to put signage up everywhere on every piece, every parcel, every open space that they purchase? I mean, because right now they can go in and yeah, they can purchase open space in the unincorporated part of the county. I'm wondering if this would apply if they bought open space in another municipality. I assume it does.
Senator Kirkland, can I ask for a senatorial 5? Are you sure?
We'll take a senatorial 5.
Yes.
Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to lay over House Bill 1029 as amended until tomorrow, February 26th, Wednesday, 2025.
The motion is to move over House Bill 1029 as amendment until tomorrow, February 26th. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the bill will be laid over till tomorrow. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the committee rise and report.
The motion is for the committee to rise and report. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The committee will rise and report.
Senate will come to order. Senator Coker.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the committee has met and heard a number of bills under consideration. Will the clerk please read the report?
February 25th, 2025. Mr. President, your committee of the whole begs leave to report it has had under consideration the following attached bills, being the second reading thereof, and makes the following recommendations thereon. Senate Bill 24 as amended, Senate Bill 151 as amended, Senate Bill 86 as amended, Senate Bill 77 passed on second reading and ordered engrossed and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. House Bill 1030 as amended, passed on second reading and ordered revised and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. Senate Bill 141, House Bill 1029 as amended, laid over until February 26, 2025 and retaining their place on the calendar. Senate Bill 79 laid over until February 27, 2025 and retaining its place on the calendar.
Senator Coker.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of the report.
The motion is the adoption of the committee of the whole report. Are there any no votes? With a vote of 33 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 1 excused, and 1 vacant, the committee of the whole report is adopted. Senate Bill 24 is amended, Senate Bill 151 is amended, Senate Bill 86 is amended, Senate Bill 77 passed on second reading, ordered engrossed and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. House Bill 1030 is amended, passed on second reading and ordered revised and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. Senate Bill 141, House Bill 1029 is amended, laid over until 2/26/2025, retaining their place on the calendar, and Senate Bill 79 laid over until 2/27/2025, retaining its place on the calendar. Governor's appointments. Consent calendar. Mr. Schaffler, please read the appointment list on the consent calendar.
Member of the State Board of Great Outdoors Colorado Trust Fund for a term expiring April 15, 2028. Bobby Massey of Larkspur, Colorado, to serve as a representative of the 4th Congressional District appointed.
Majority Leader Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the passage of the appointment on the consideration of Governor's appointment consent calendar, which is Bobby Massey of Larkspur to the Great Outdoors Colorado Trust Fund.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, the motion is the confirmation of the appointment on the consent calendar. Are there any no votes? With a vote of 33 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 1 excused, and 1 vacant, the appointment is confirmed. Announcements. Senator Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. President. A moment of personal privilege.
Granted.
Is it still morning? Yeah, good morning, colleagues. Would like to recognize some special guests on the floor with me today, folks from First Bank. First Bank joins us today in the chamber since February the 28th, here in a couple more days, 1963, First Bank, which means they're older than most of the folks in this chamber, has been committed to banking for good. Chartered here in Colorado, it's among the largest and best performing privately held banks in the United States, with over 100 branch locations across Colorado, Arizona, and California. The bank's philosophy has led to its success. Do what's right for customers, communities, and employees, and good things will happen. Please join me in welcoming First Bank to the Capitol lobby.
Welcome to the Senate. Senator Kipp.
Thank you, Mr. President. Hey, Finance Committee, first and most importantly, our Finance Committee today is across the street in LSBB. So don't show up upstairs. You will find some people in state affairs in our room. Also, we today have a confirmation of State Savings and Loan Association, I believe, and we have SB 25-147 and SB 25-133 up. So I look forward to seeing you all in committee today. Thank you.
Senator Gonzalez. Senator Weissman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. This is to announce the business for the State Affairs Committee this afternoon. We are still meeting at 2 o'clock. That has not changed. We have 2 bills on our calendar, 135 and 47. That has not changed. We are going to be in the old Supreme Court room, and Old State Library will be an overflow room if necessary. We're expecting a lot of people with interest in the matters before the committee. We're also going to flip the order for the same reason. So from the top, 2 p.m., Old Supreme Court room. We will first hear 135. Thereafter, we will proceed to Senate Bill 47. Thank you.
Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. President. Having spoken with you, the Majority Leader, and the Minority Leader, I request to be excused this coming Friday, February the 28th.
Excellent. Approved.
Thanks.
Senator Danielson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, colleagues. Just following what Senator Weissman said, the Business, Labor, and Technology Committee will be meeting at their regular time, but in room 352. Thanks.
Senator Frizzell.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to announce that I have asked and received permission to be absent this Thursday and Friday, February 27th and 28th. And I asked for permission from the Minority Leader, the Majority Leader, and yourself. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I have an announcement. If you're looking for breakfast tomorrow, the Problem Gaming Awareness Day is tomorrow in the Division of Department of Revenue, and the Colorado Division of Gaming, Responsible Gaming, is hosting breakfast. Come down to the West Foyer and learn about, or it's in the basement rotunda, and learn about all the work they're doing to help folks with gaming addiction. Thanks.
Any additional announcements? Members, just one quick reminder, there is food in the foyer, West Foyer, from the Black and African communities. If you're looking for some good soul food, go down there and get a plate. That being said, Majority Leader Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate adjourn until 9 a.m. Wednesday, February 26, 2025.
Any discussion? Seeing none, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The Senate will stand in adjournment until 9 a.m. on Wednesday, February 26, 2025.